This video gives a brief introduction to copyright. It will be divided into two parts, copyright in publishing and copyright in teaching. Let's make a start with copyright in publishing. When you're preparing a manuscript for publication, it's important to remember the journal expects you to check any copyright clearance for third-party material you may have used. This can include images, figures, and graphs, amongst other things. Remember when carrying out your research to keep track of where you are finding these materials, as you need to be able to give appropriate attribution to all third-party material used in your work. When we're thinking about copyright in publishing, the way your research is published affects the copyright considerations you need to make. There are lots of different ways to publish research, but here we're going to focus on subscription-based journals, open access journals, hybrid journals, books, and open access monographs. A subscription-based journal is a journal where published work sits behind a paywall. That means anyone who wants to read the work has to either pay to access it or be affiliated with an organization that pays to access it. When publishing in subscription-based journals, normally you either sign over the copyright to the publisher or give the publisher a license to publish your work. If you have signed over the copyright, then you no longer own the rights to the paper. This is important to remember, as it means you will likely need to ask the journal's permission to reuse your work in the future. If you have given the publisher a license to publish the work, you will still own the rights to your work, but the copyright agreement may restrict the way you can use it. Make sure to always read any copyright agreements in full before signing. If you need any help with this, do speak to us in the library. Copyright agreements with subscription-based journals usually allow you to keep the copyright to the author's accepted manuscript, or AAM. This is the version of the paper after peer review, but before the journal typesetting and formatting has taken place. When signing any copyright agreements with publishers, it's important to remember that you can request changes to their standard terms. In some cases, you can even change the agreement so that you keep all the rights to the document. If you want any help with this, do get in touch with the library. When publishing in open access journals, the author keeps all rights to their work. This includes the final published version. The journal then gets a license to publish the work. This kind of agreement means you are free to choose the work how you choose to. When publishing your work in an open access journal, you choose which license you want to assign to your work. On the slide, you can see the different elements of Creative Commons licenses available. Creative Commons licenses, or CC licenses, are built of a combination of these four elements, and these elements can be combined in different ways. The by element, known as attribution, allows reuse of work as long as the author or licenser gets credit. The SA element, which stands for share alike, means modified versions of the work can be distributed, but only under the same or not more restrictive license as the original work. The NC element, which stands for non-commercial, means reuse is only allowed for non-commercial purposes, so no one can make money from reusing the work. The ND element, which stands for no derivatives, means reuse is allowed, but no modifications to the original work are permitted. If you're funded, you might be restricted in which license you can use. Funders often ask for CC BY, though in humanities, CC BY ND is more common. Publishing in hybrid journals means that while the journal operates as a subscription-based journal, you do have an option to pay to make your article available open access. Like with publishing in an open access journal, if you pay to make your work open access in a hybrid journal, you retain the rights for the paper and attach a CC license to the work. If you publish traditionally in a hybrid journal, the copyright is usually transferred to the publisher, like with a subscription-based journal. When publishing a book or a book chapter, the publisher will ask the author to assign certain rights. Copyright agreements when publishing in books varies a lot from publisher to publisher, so reading the copyright agreement in full is very important. In general, there are three different options as shown on the slide. If you assign the copyright to the publisher now owns the work. However, the author usually agrees to a rate for royalties. If you give the publisher exclusive rights to publish, you as the author normally keep the copyright, but you are not allowed to publish or disseminate the work elsewhere. If you give the publisher non-exclusive rights, typically you are allowed to disseminate the work, but you cannot republish. When publishing in open access monographs, the same concepts apply as when publishing in open access journals. The author retains the rights and gives a license to the book publisher to publish. The author assigns a CC license to the work. So far we've looked at copyright from the perspective of publishing. Now we're going to look at copyright in teaching. Copyright affects what can be used in teaching materials, such as lecture slides and Moodle pages, and also affects what can be included on online reading lists. As an educational institution, we have two main licenses that allow us to use works more broadly than general copyright legislation allows. The first of these is the Copyright Licensing Agency License, or CLA license. The CLA license makes it easier for us to reuse written content. For books that are covered by the license, up to 10% or one chapter of the work can be copied, whichever is greater. For journals, one article from each issue of each journal can be copied. Copies can only be shared with students and staff of the institution. We report all digital copies made under this license. This reporting takes place through our online reading list system, and therefore all copies of reading materials need to be included on our reading lists, not on Moodle. The reading list can then be embedded into Moodle. Where material added to a reading list isn't covered by the license, our reading list team in the library will let you know. In these cases, we can sometimes apply for permission directly from the publishers, though this isn't always successful. Be prepared, therefore, to suggest alternatives to these resources. The second license we have is the Educational Recording Agency License, or the ERA license. This license allows staff and students to record or make copies of programs for educational use. Educational use is the important point here, as any copies made under this license cannot be just for entertainment or for any commercial activity. Materials also cannot be shared on public platforms, so it's always best to stick to Moodle and online reading lists to share these resources. The easiest way to make use of this license is to use Box of Broadcasts, or BOB. Many TV programs and films that have been broadcast in the UK are available on Box of Broadcasts, which you can access through the library search. If a TV program or film that you wish to use on your module is not available through Box of Broadcasts, please do get in touch with the library and we will try to source it for you. There are some problems with this license, however, as the ERA license only applies to the UK and during the COVID-19 also to the EU. This means that the license does not currently cover use by our students who are studying overseas. If you require any advice on this when using broadcasts in your teaching resources, do get in touch with the library. Where the sharing of materials for education is not covered by one of these licenses, we can refer to copyright exceptions. There are various copyright exceptions we refer to when making copyright decisions, but Section 32 is most relevant to us here. Section 32 is an exception for illustration for instruction. Fair dealing under this exception applies when use of a work is non-commercial, purely for instruction, and has sufficient acknowledgement. As with many things in copyright, this is somewhat open to interpretation. Non-commercial, for example, seems straightforward, but as students pay to attend university, questions can be raised over whether this is non-commercial. The consensus is still yes on this, as we as a university do not make a profit. The second consideration for instruction is sometimes interpreted as meaning use just within a classroom. However, there is general agreement that online platforms such as online reading lists and Moodle are now an essential part of teaching and are therefore an extension of the classroom. This has been even further reinforced since the shift to online teaching. In terms of using these exceptions, the usual fair dealing question should be considered. Is the material being used relevant to what is being taught? Are we reproducing an unreasonable proportion of the original? Is our usage really a replacement for purchasing additional copies? Could it damage the interests of the copyright owner in some other way? Have we acknowledged the author and source adequately? A good rule of thumb when asking yourselves these questions is to put yourself in the position of the owner of the copyright and think whether you would be happy with your work being used in this way. If you are ever unsure about using materials for teaching under this exception, please do get in touch with us in the library. Thank you for watching this brief introduction to copyright. We know that copyright can be complicated, so please do get in touch with us if you have any questions.